Welcome to USA Global TV and Radio, where our mission is to provide education, entertainment, hope, and inspiration. USA Global TV and Radio connects you with experts and audiences all around the world every single day to help you succeed in business and to live a richer life. Visit us at usaglobaltv.com to learn about career and life-changing training and mentoring programs like the Listening Mentor. Subscribe to our newsletter to stay informed about our special programs and offers. Discover how you can become a guest on one of our shows or a host or producer of a USA Global TV and Radio show of your very own. That's USA Global TV and Radio, where the doctor is always in.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome home to USA Global TV and Radio, where we provide world-class education, entertainment, hope, and inspiration. I'm Dr. JACALYN KERBECK, and our show today is the Books, Blogs, and Poetry Show. And we are super excited to welcome back a very special guest. Before we bring him out, let's welcome the star of our show, DIANN BOEHM, who seems to be writing every moment she's awake. She sees something, she's writing about it. Hello and welcome.
Hi, Dr. JACALYN. It's great to see you.
Thank you. It's great to see you as well. And I'm looking at this banner, DIANN, and it's definitely not long enough because there's so many more wonderful pieces of work that you've put out there that we're going to have something special to me, and I'm going to have to contact StreamYard directly. So what have you been up to?
You're so kind. Actually, I had the most wonderful week. Actually, it was last week. I was able to go to this very exclusive store, and they had a children's day, and I got to read to all these kids. And I don't know if you know, Dr. JACALYN, but I am like totally in my element when I'm with young children, because being a school teacher, our former classroom teacher, I should say, and understanding little kids' minds and them just really respond to my new book, Boomer. It was just really exciting. I don't know who was more excited, the kids or me.
I saw those pictures, DIANN, and you look like a little kid yourself. You're definitely in your glory. You're so wonderful with children, and your new book is amazing. Of course, we have a sponsorship that we're going to run before the end of the show. But I'm really excited to welcome back our guests, and I know you both have the same publicist. And when Sebastien was here before, we had a great conversation. So let's get right to it, and let's welcome fantasy author Sebastien De Castell. Up bright and early. Hello.
Hello. It's nice to be with you this bright early morning.
It's nice to be with you as well. And thanks for getting up early. Where are you joining us from?
I'm in Vancouver, British Columbia.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, I really enjoyed the last time that we met with you. What's been going on since we saw you last?
Oh my goodness. So I had the launch of Malevolent 7, which was the sort of dark, irreverent fantasy novel about anti-hero mages who don't see themselves in any way as the heroes of the story. But as with all of us, sometimes we all have to be the hero once in a while. And so I went to the UK to handle some of the launches over there, which was terrific fun. It was great getting to see readers again. Of course, I usually am in the UK and in Europe a couple of times a year for book events and things like that. But during the pandemic, of course, there was a lot less of that. So it was great to be sort of back there. And then now it feels like I've just finished some of the publicity for Malevolent 7. And of course, now I've got Fate of the Argosi coming out, which is the third book in the Argosi series, which is a young adult fantasy series about a young woman living in a world full of mages and magic who is learning to follow a different path where a lot of her abilities, her strengths come from what we call the Argosi talents, which are really just human talents that all of us share: dance, eloquence, music, even swagger, and having to use those tools that, again, are part of all of our shared humanity to survive in a world where there's a lot of dangerous magic and monsters and other kinds of things. So I'm quite excited about having that coming out soon.
Congratulations.
Wow. That is super exciting. Yes, congratulations. And I love when you say I go over to the UK, you're traveling. I mean, how exciting as someone who is an author herself and is just behind a green screen going nowhere. So I really admire the fact that you have fans all over the world.
It is always remarkable because you don't really know, of course, right? I mean, all of us, you put your work out into the world in various forms, whether through traditional publishers or through self-publishing, and you don't always know sort of where that's going to go and how far. For example, my books have been translated into, I think, 15 languages, and it's always surprising to me whether in one country, whether Germany will be my books will be popular or not, or the Czech Republic, or in Israel, or in one of my books for the first time came out in Ukraine this year. I had no idea. Like, we always think because Ukraine is dealing with a very difficult war, we just assume sort of everything else freezes. But in fact, the first Spellslinger book was bought for Ukrainian translation during the after the or just before the conflict started, and they've just published it now. So it's remarkable seeing where your work ends up in the world.
Yeah, that's very exciting. And by the way, I also love behind you how you have your books on that LCD or whatever it is that flashes.
Mhm.
It really grabs your attention.
Yeah, I have to have that sort of shelf behind me of my books, because it's the way now that I kind of track time. Because one of the great things about being an author, of course, is that most of us, when I've worked at different kinds of jobs over the course of my life, it's quite easy to lose track of a year, where you sort of think, well, what was I doing in 2007? Like, what did I actually do in that year? I know I worked, but what did I accomplish? Whereas when you're an author, of course, you're generally like, your work produces a book or 2 books or 3 books. And so I always like to have books behind me, because it helps me kind of get a sense of, oh, that's what I've been doing for the last 10 years.
Yeah, that's part of your resume right there.
Yeah. It's funny. Because every once in a while, for some odd reason, I'll be asked to send a CV or a resume, and I don't know why. Someone will say, we'd like you to come and do this masterclass or do this event, and I'll say sure, and then they'll say, oh, by the way, we need you to send in a CV, and I'm just sort of like, would you like a stack of books? I can send you that.
What did they say to that?
They usually understand it. It's one of those things where I guess people have, we all of our different corporate environments and things like that have systems and procedures, and we put those in place. And so when you have that rare exception where you're sort of like, where you don't, where whatever value I bring is not defined by where I worked in 15, 20 years ago, or where I went to school. That is one of the great things, again, about being an author. It's a strange experience. Like, what you do and your kind of contribution and your value is so easily shown. It's completely transparent to the world, right? Someone can look at your book, and that's really all they need to know about whether you're qualified or not qualified to do one thing or another.
That is such an excellent point. And you're so right. I mean, where we went to school, our chapters, whether it was teaching or working in the corporate world, it seems like so long ago that this is who I am now. This is my chapter of life. And so here's my book. I didn't know they made CDs anymore, but okay.
Yeah, the old curriculum vitae stuff is interesting, but yeah, it's a tremendously rare privilege that your labor is never really hidden, in a sense. I mean, it's funny because people talk about writing as if it's this, it's this long, toiling, lonely thing, and nobody knows all of the work that you put into something. But in fact, your work becomes something that everyone can instantly see. Whereas, yeah, when I worked, I was a director of strategic program development for an entertainment school, which was a fantastic job and a fantastic school, and I loved working with future animators and filmmakers and designers and things like that. but most of the work is kind of, was part of a time and place and sort of hidden. Whereas again, yeah, when you're writing novels, you get to make something that your work is always there forever. It's always easy to find. So yeah, I guess I'm saying it really is one of the truly great jobs. I recommend it to everyone.
Thank you so much. And in your new series, your Argosi series, there's a focus on people owing a debt, cleaning up a debt. And I feel like through the pandemic, maybe as a result of the end of it, a lot of eyes were opened, a lot of awakening and awareness about things that we may have done to someone or judgments we may have had. How are you aligning this type of theme through your series?
Well, it's interesting. When I wrote the Spellslinger series, which is a 6-book young adult series, young adult books often, not exclusively, but often have a strong coming of age theme, which we can sort of imagine. And when you sit down and think, all right, well, what are all the coming of age themes? You tend to think, well, there's, discovering yourself, or leaving home for the first time, or finding or being rejected by a peer group. And I really thought when I hit the last of those 6 books that I kind of mined all of the important coming of age themes. But as I started writing the Argosi books, which are set in the same world, they're featuring Farius Parfax, who's a young woman who is almost everyone's favorite character from the Spellslinger series. I really started to discover that there were a lot of these other themes. And you're right when you say that during the pandemic, I think we started to become aware of different kinds of built up debt that we have, whether it's to particular communities, or whether it's to our families, or whether it's even to ourselves, things that these kind of internal debts that we've built up that we haven't paid off. And so I thought, when I was writing Fate of the Argosi, which is the 3rd and latest book in that series, and one of the good things about the Argosi books in general is that you can actually, you don't have to start from the first one if you don't want to. If the 3rd one is what sort of appeals to someone, they can pick it up and read it right away. But I kind of became fascinated with this notion of, I've had this experience, and we probably have all had this experience, where you're on the cusp of being able to do something you want to do, travel or start a new life somewhere, or move, any of these things, where you're like, wow, I could actually do this thing I really want to do. And then you suddenly realize, but no, there's these people or someone who I kind of owe something to. I can't leave them. They need me. And the Argosi as a kind of not a tribe, but an order. It's sort of like the Jedi, only instead of using the Force, it's all very human talents. They have a kind of a notion of debts that are in the form of cards. So they're using cards for everything. They're card players. They use cards as maps. They use cards as tools. And so one of their decks is a deck called the Disharmonies, where every time you do something where you leave someone worse off than when you found them, and you can't fix it at the time, you paint a card to represent that debt. And so Farius, at the beginning of Fate of the Argosi, is finally at the state where she's ready to start her own path. She's ready. She's got the skills and the talents, and she's survived the things that she needs to survive. And she's ready to go off and have all of the adventures she wants. But she realizes she has accumulated, even as a young woman of 19, she's accumulated all of these debts. And so she starts trying to pay them off one by one, starting with helping to stage a prison break to free someone who saved her when she was younger from trouble, get them out of this rather horrible prison. But when she does, she ends up meeting someone else in that prison who is part of the tribe that she comes from, and says, well, you actually owe a much bigger debt to the people who raised you, to the tribe that protected you when you were a child. And so the book itself ends up being, as well as being a raucous adventure with, toxic smoke belching spire goats and spell ships that sail through shadow, is also just an exploration of something I think we all deal with, which is, what do you do when you have all these things you kind of want to do in life, but you have these debts to other people, to other communities, to other that you sometimes didn't even realize that you owed. And I really became fascinated with what is it like when you're a teenager and you're first coming to that realization because when you're a child, a young child, you rarely have a sense of owing debts, right? We don't tell children a lot of the time, oh, well, and you owe this and you owe that, at least not in a way that is practical for them. But there's a point in our lives where we first start to realize that, yeah, actually we can inherit debts, we can inherit obligations. And so that's what Farius is dealing with in Fate of the Argosi, and mixed with all the magic and adventure, it becomes, for me, it was just a really fascinating story to write and to get to explore alongside Farius.
Wow, congratulations.
Very kind.
So, Sebastian, I love what you just shared there. And I think what's so important is that you're bringing awareness to the fact that it's okay to realize that you have debts, that you owe these debts. It's almost like paying it forward instead of keeping it trapped and hidden and living in shame. What do you think?
Oh, I agree entirely. In fact, one of the themes that runs through the book, because books, one of the wonderful things about books is that they're quite long, so you get to explore themes in various ways, and one of them is just how enriching it can be sometimes to kind of go and pay back that debt, to sort of do that beneficial thing for someone else, and to have a sense of not just restoring what's owed to them, but restoring something in ourselves. It's very difficult to carry the weight of debt. If you think about it, even in the most practical terms, when we have a mortgage, we often really feel that mortgage weighing down on us. And most people who've been fortunate enough to pay off a mortgage will, I think, can describe very easily that incredible feeling of freedom, of going, okay, I've fulfilled this debt that I had, and now I can really take pleasure in this thing, this place that is now my home. And so it's the same for Farius at first, as she, sort of pays off the first debt by helping to free this friend who it turns out, in the years that they've been apart, ended up stuck in a rather terrible prison. That sort of sense of freedom and reconnection and joy. But sometimes as well, and one of the sort of themes that runs through the book later is, you can also run down a cycle where debts almost become this continuous chain for which there's no end, and which become a kind of an excuse to not make tough choices about your own life. Oh, I should be doing this thing, but I can't because I owe this person or this community or whatever else. So there's a lot of territory to explore with that, and that was really unexpected for me, because again, as I mentioned off the top, you sort of think of coming of age stories, and you have the sort of the stock ones that you think about, the stock themes. And I just found this one to be tremendously rich, especially when sort of viewed from the standpoint of a teenager, because there is a point in our lives where we suddenly shift from not thinking about owing people at all to all of a sudden realizing, oh God, I owe everybody for something.
I absolutely love this, because I think within this fantasy world, and the kids are excited, or the adults even reading this book are excited, the adults are going to be thinking, oh man, I remember that moment in my life, and I want to see if this person reacts the same way. And then the young person's like, oh, I'm really learning something as well. I just really admire you for that, because it's something that we all deal with, and depending on how we are raised, we may not ever realize it just kind of hits you in the face.
I agree completely, and I think one of the things that fiction is so valuable for generally is giving us language to put to feelings. We all experience the wide, full range of human experiences, but we don't always have the right language to be able to kind of work with it. And even when there's a formal language for something, whether it's grief or debt or coming of age or even love, right? We have certain kinds of formalized language, but those don't always resonate for us as individuals. And so what I think fiction is particularly wonderful for is creating these almost alternate forms of language for things that we're going through, where a particular reader can go, oh, that's what that feels like to me. That's the language that describes what I'm experiencing, which then gives them the freedom to kind of work with it conceptually. I'm sure we've all experienced this. When you have a feeling that you can't put words to, you have very little say over how you deal with it. Once you have language to put to the things you're experiencing, to put the feelings that you're having, it feels more, to me anyway, like, okay, well, now I can kind of work with it. Now I'm, it's not just happening to me. Now I'm part of the process of dealing with it. So I think that is really one of the wonders of fiction. And for me, that's one of the real joys of writing fantasy fiction in particular, because fantasy fiction really gives you a lot of freedom to put new language, to put new settings. Because again, you know, in a fiction, in a piece of fiction, the setting is part of that language that you're creating for someone to deal with different kinds of situations and experiences. So as a fantasy author, I get to kind of take feelings or experiences that might be a little tricky for me as an individual to really fully understand. And then by putting them into this other world that's really built around those experiences, those feelings, those themes, all of a sudden I've got a new language to work with myself, but also to share with readers.
Thank you, Sebastien. I kind of feel like, and I'm wondering if either of you agree with this, is that in this new series that you have, when you talk about this chain of debts and how they're all linked together, one might think that it could be a fantasy to actually be able to repay your debts, but in truth, it's actually a reality. So it could actually transform the way people look at things. What do you think?
Oh, I think absolutely. People often say that talk about fantasy and science fiction and genres like that as escapist fiction, as if the idea is you read these to escape your daily life. And I think there can be truth to that. And I think that there's nothing wrong with escapism as a kind of, just as a pleasure, whether a guilty pleasure or not. However, my experience with fantasy fiction, and certainly the kind of fantasy fiction I try to write, is less about escaping the real world and more about re-enchanting the real world. And so I find that when I kind of disappear off into a fantasy narrative, into a fantasy book, and into this other world where things just work on different rules and we have all of these different things that we don't get to see in our own world, that it helps me when I'm coming back to my own world, in the sense that I can kind of bring those feelings back, and those help kind of re-enchant my own daily life. You know, I think the ultimate value of a fantasy novel is if you begin your day feeling like, well, I just live in this mundane, ordinary world, and I have this mundane, ordinary job and this mundane, ordinary life, and you don't feel any kind of magic around it. And then you go read a fantasy novel, and there might be dragons or wizards or whatever else you happen to love in there. But there's also the themes that are dealing with things that are part of your own daily life, your own world. And then you come back out of that book and you look at the world that you live in and you go, wow, actually, you know what? This world is kind of magical. It does have lots of sources of wonder in it. And so that's why I say, like, I think the best thing that fantasy fiction can do for us is not help us escape the world, but help us re-enchant our own world.
I love that. Re-enchant our own world. You need to write that down as a quote for you.
Yeah, one day when I'm qualified, I'll do so.
You're qualified, trust me.
We were talking before the show began about the fact that you're a runner. And for me, I know I used to run. I do a lot of walking now, but I would be able to escape into my fantasy world while I'm out getting exercise. And I'm just wondering, do you get any inspiration when you're out running?
Oh, I absolutely do. It's probably the only thing that keeps me running. I'm a pretty terrible runner. I find that, you know, the process of coming up with story for me, and I think this is true for a lot of writers, has to do first with kind of stimulating your own emotions in a pretty raw and unfocused way, and then allowing them to kind of come out. And that's tricky for me to do if I'm just sitting at a computer. Whereas I'm very affected by music, and I'm very affected by running partly because of, you know, you're just exerting yourself a lot. I remember when I was doing some work as a pretty I was a terrible. And I remember an acting coach who said, when you're going for an audition, what you should do is go into a room by yourself and jump up and down really, really fast until you're like sweating, and then go deliver your lines. As long as you're physically activate, your emotions and your acting will come through. And so I find when I'm running and I'm listening to music, I'm in that almost heightened emotional state, even though I don't necessarily intend to be. And that's when a lot of the story ideas come through for me. Trader's Blade, which was my debut novel, which was the book that got me a 4-book deal and launched my career as a full-time novelist, was entirely written from scenes that were coming to my head from going for runs over the course of 5 years and having to just keep myself entertained.
That is so interesting. For me, it's working in the garden, and like you, music really does something really big for me. So I think that all of us authors need those moments where we just have our own escape so that we can allow things to come into our minds. What do you think?
I do. I think that a big part of the experience of being an author is the need to go out into the world and experience things that kind of awaken our own artistic responses, our own emotional responses. We need to go out and get in a little bit of trouble so that we have something to write about. And there's lots of ways of doing that. And some of it is, for me, travel. I love to travel. My wife and I love to travel together. We're going to Jordan for the first time in a couple of weeks, which is going to be really exciting. But another way is simply being in a place where your body is in motion. I think writers often don't realize this, that yes, it's all happening in the mind, but in order to unleash the mind, you have to make the body doing something, and so yeah, gardening, knitting, running, all of these things. This is where a lot of the ideas come from.
It's so true. And I'm not a runner, but I love to walk. And I don't connect to anything because I want to hear the birds, and I might stop, and then because I might hear because I sing anyway. And so then I want to hear like the repeated sounds, and then I'm like, oh, I think that's how composers do it. They just listen to the birds, because before you know it, you actually have a little bit of chain music going between all the birds, and I get excited about that. And then I continue on, and then my brain's like, ooh, that'd be so cute to put it in such and such book or whatever.
Yeah, it's giving the space to kind of to give your thoughts room to move at their own pace. So when I find for myself when I'm trying to come up with a plot line, or I'm trying to come up with an outline, the next scene, what shall I do? What should this magic system look like? When I'm in that mode, the speed of thought is almost too rhythmic, right? It's like watching the second hand on a clock just ticking forward all the time. Whereas when you kind of do something where your body is engaged, or you're just outside of your normal environment, that's when your thinking simultaneously slows down and speeds up, right? All of a sudden you're not very conscious of what you're thinking about, but then I guess in a way that gives room for the unconscious to start to say, hey, here's these things that I've been thinking about, and you hear that bird over there, and that bird song you're hearing? Well, that's actually kind of a metaphor for this experience you're having, and now you can turn that into a piece of story that can go into a book.
I love that. I have another question for you, a different topic. If someone is listening to you for the very first time in our audience, and they're like, gosh, she's written so many books, where do I begin? Where would you suggest they begin?
I would always say that the first novel, and I think everyone should write a novel. I think all of us have the capacity to write a good novel. It doesn't mean it's a novel that everybody else is going to want to read, but a lot of the time when I write a novel, I don't write a novel expecting anyone else to want to read it. Malevolent Seven, which was the book we talked about the last time I was on the show, was a book I wrote literally just for myself. I didn't even intend to show it to anyone. I wasn't going to self-publish it. And then I mentioned it casually to my agent, who said, oh no, I want to see this. And then suddenly they decided they loved it. And I thought that was the weirdest thing in the world. And it ended up being a successful book, and which has been great for me. And recently the same thing happened. I wrote a book that wasn't meant, I didn't think would have an audience necessarily. But my publishers asked to read it, and then they said, oh, we're going to crash the publishing schedule. We want to put it out by Christmas. And so I say that as a way of introducing the notion that a lot of the time, even when you're a pretty experienced novelist, I think Fate of the Argosi is my 15th published novel in the last 8 years or 9 years. Even when you're quite experienced, you still don't write knowing whether anybody's going to want to read the book or not. Which means when you're first starting out, you really have to stay away from worrying about how many books has someone else written, or is someone going to read this? Is this too similar to something else? You just have to write the book that you most want to read as boldly as you can. And if the book you most want to read is a new kind of Twilight book, like you want sparkly never allow the cynicism of which you hear people talking about the things they love. So for people like Twilight, I'm not a Twilight fan, but I have nothing but respect for the people that love those books. But you'll hear people talking about the Twilight books, be very cynical, sparkly vampires, it's all, romance, sparkly vampires. Don't try to make your sparkly vampires less sparkly because you think, oh, well, then the cynical people won't be as mean to me. Make them sparkly. Make the romance, make everything what you love as big and bold as you possibly can. When I wrote Trader's Blade, I wrote the most swashbuckling novel I could think of. Right? I left it all out on the feet. There's like 11 sword fights in that book. Each one's completely different. When I finished writing the book, I thought, oh my God, are people just going to just hate this and just think it's terribly stupid and tacky and not good enough? And that book launched my career. And people still say that's my favorite books. Because it's full of what I love. And that's all you really have to do. The second thing I'd say, and this is probably the most important one, I think it lasts, hopefully it fits with people, is your first novel is not so much a book, it is a journey through a dark forest. And if you've never gone on that journey through that long, dark forest before, the last thing you're worried about is, what book you're going to end up with at the end. What you need to just worry about is, I just got to keep going. I have to keep walking. I have to keep writing pages. Because the only way to get through that forest is by writing words down, putting story down. It's that first book is very much a journey. It's not a product. It's not even necessarily a piece of art. The art is just a consequence of you as a writer going on that very challenging but very rewarding, exciting journey through that dark forest that is filled with all of your unconscious fears and hopes and aspirations and experiences. And once you come out on the other side, not only, and this is the best part about being a writer, not only have you gone on that very difficult journey, you're holding a manuscript. No sane person would ever say, I'm going to run my first marathon. But I'm only going to do it if I think I can win. You don't run a marathon the first time to win or to come out faster than everyone. You run a marathon to change your body into a body that's capable of running marathons. You don't write your first book to have a bestseller or a blockbuster or even a particularly great work of art. You write your first book to change your mind, a mind that can write books. And so approaching it that way, I'm going to go on a journey. I'm going to go through this dark forest that's full of my own fears and hopes. And I'm going to write page after page after page. And when I get through out of that dark forest, I will be holding a manuscript in my hand that will be ready for me to rewrite, revise, whatever I decide to do with. And I will have changed myself into the kind of person who can write another novel and another novel after that. And that's what it's all about. I was like so many people, someone who thought about, oh, wouldn't it be great to write a novel? One day I'll try to write a novel. I should wait until I know how to do it, and all of this sort of nonsense. And it wasn't until I was 27 when I finally followed a course that was on a set of 24 cassette tapes. I literally had to go on a cassette player because cassette players were already kind of gone. And just all of this very strange, course on book tapes. It wasn't really a course. Alf McInerney, the author at the time, saying, your age today, write our pages. And I did. And that's how I got my first novel, was by not thinking of it as this product or piece of art, but rather as a journey. Once you've done it once, you do it as many times after as that's why you should do it, and that's why I always approach it that way. Sorry, that was a very long answer.
No, that was great. There was so much to words of wisdom and so much to dive into that you shared. It is a journey, and you're so right. If a person just says, I'm going to do this, but I need to wait, it's never going to happen. Just do it and learn from the experience. And then I loved how you said, you don't enter a marathon. I'm going to enter it because I want to win it. Otherwise, I'm not going to do it. That's like anything in life. You don't enter a talent show because I know I can win it. You enter it because you want that experience to grow. Correct? And
it's about transformation, and even after you've written books. Like I said, I've written novels in my relatively short. But every book, including Fate of the Argosi, talking about the theme of debt. It's the theme of debt. Every book is an active personal transformation. You're going through the experiences of your characters, but you're also on a more kind of tactical level. You're going through a new process of writing. Every book kind of requires its own process, and every book is it's like going on a different, mountain climbing edition, I guess would be an analogy, right? Just because you climb one mountain doesn't mean you know how to climb this other mountain. This other mountain's got all its own dangers. But once you climb it, you've turned yourself into someone who can climb yet another mountain after that. That might be a little different. So it's just a constant process of personal transformation. And I maintain novelists are so fortunate because the work that we do, our day-to-day work, happens to also be something that allows us to grow on a day-to-day basis, to think about new things, to explore new themes in our own lives. And also at the end, you end up with a lovely book, and whether you read it or not, still this wonderful book that kind of contains that experience of what you're doing.
That's wonderful. My next question for you is, so you have all these different characters, and maybe some are your least favorite, and some of them are like, I'm going to write about this person. But all of a sudden, does one little character that you're like, wait a minute, it's my turn. Does this happen to you? And then you're like, whoa, I didn't realize that person needed to say all that.
Yeah, it's a fascinating one. Again, it's that between tricking ourselves into believing we're making conscious choices sometimes versus just listening to our own subconscious or unconscious, however one wants to think of it, and letting those kind of voices that are in us come out. So I always like there's this classic analogy of the conscious and the subconscious, which I'm sure you've all heard of, which is the notion of the unconscious is like a racehorse, the conscious is the jockey, steering the racehorse. And years ago, I wrote a book a guy named Jonathan Haidt, I think, who was talking about how there's no scientific basis for that analogy. Really, it's more like a tiny little person on top of a huge elephant. And the elephant is the unconscious, and the tiny person is driving the elephant. But the elephant is going where it wants to go, and then the little person goes, "Oh, I'm headed off to the right. It must be because I've decided that I want to explore what's over in that forest." When in fact they make the decision. In other words, a lot of the time we're just rationalizing the decisions that our unconscious has already made for us. And as a novelist, I think that is particularly true. Very often we have a character we think we're going to write. It's going to be our main character. This could be a character who's only going to appear once. This could be a book after that. And then all of a sudden, another character keeps showing up and keeps making things exactly as you say. Keeps things to contribute, say, in the story. And then and sort of tell ourselves, "Oh, yes, I must have decided I was so clever in devising that character who just, becomes more and more important." But often we don't really know. And I find that as an author a lot, where I'm writing a novel. I was on a panel recently. I remember saying to the subject that came up that there's an interesting process when you finish a book where it involves the kind of mythologizing the origins of the book. Where when you hear authors, myself, talking about a book after it's done, it sounds like there was this grand design behind it. But when you're writing a book, all your experience, for me anyway, is I have no idea what to do next. What's happening? Oh, wait, this character wants to say something. Okay, I'll explore where that goes. And so we, and I say this because a lot of new writers get disheartened because when they're writing, they feel like they're just going through a giant mess that, only barely makes sense. And then they hear, this King or Robert Howard or any of these great authors out there describing a book, being interviewed about a book, and it sounds like it was all part of a magnificent plan. But of course, that's something that only comes afterwards. So yeah, I'm in a constant state of going, I don't know why I'm writing this right now, but I need to write something, and this is what's in my head. So let's just see where it goes.
Right, exactly. And isn't it exciting when you sit down and you're ready and you're like la 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 la, and then you're like, what? Okay, da 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 da. And then you're like, get into this zone. And by the time you're finished, you close it and you go, I don't know what just happened, but I am so happy. Right?
Yeah. When you finally get something that just sort of starts to come out, in a really powerful way, and feels kind of real, right? It doesn't feel like you're just stringing words together. It feels like, oh, now I'm recounting an actual story rather than fabricating. That feeling is wonderful. I will say a lot of the time when I'm working on a draft, I don't feel that. And I say that not to complain about the writing process, just so that other people know it's okay when you feel like you're just really swimming in mud and nothing's making sense. That's just part of the process. Don't worry, later on it'll all sound like it's part of a grand genius plan.
Exactly. I could talk to you all day because I just understand completely that moment, but I really want to pick your brain about some of your favorite characters, but it's already time to go. Can you believe it? So I hope you will consider coming back again, because we just love having you, and you're so passionate and exciting, and you give such wisdom to our listeners, and I just deeply appreciate you so much.
Well, thanks so much, man. An absolute pleasure for you to be here. I'm delighted to come back. And hey, at this great book coming out, many more. I've got another book coming out in December. I'm sure I'll have a lot of other strange stories to tell about the process of writing and that book and having it come out in the world.
Oh, that'd be great. But I can't let you go without saying this. So you just slipped that you have a book coming out in December, and can people pre-order it from your website?
Not yet, but in a couple of weeks. This is a book that literally I had written planning to self-publish this one because your publishers can only put out, like, they need a big long lead time to publish books, usually 18 months to 2 years. And this was a book where I had this idea. Originally it was going to be a novella, but then it became sort of a novel-length book. And I thought, oh, I'll just also publish this at some point when I have time, because that can be a lot of fun, even when you're a traditionally published author. Sometimes it's really fun and rewarding to do the process yourself. And then my publisher asked to see it at the last minute. Or it wasn't last minute to them, but it felt that way to me. And I said, okay, sure, why not? Because it's set in the world of the greatcoats, and I think they just wanted to make sure it wasn't going to be a problem. And then all of a sudden they said, we're going to crash the publishing schedule. We want to put this one out in December. And so now I suddenly went from thinking I had nothing I needed to do this summer to I have 3 weeks to do the final revisions on this novel so that it can come out. But it's really fascinating for me. I haven't seen this, I haven't experienced before of just watching what happens all of a sudden. Publishing system that is really designed around a 18-month cycle only compresses that to 4 or 5 months. So it'll be exciting to see what happens. That was a long-winded answer to a very simple question, but the actual answer is there will be pre-order very soon. But we're just literally getting the cover done now.
Congratulations. And I know pre-order is very exciting. So yes, you must come back and let us help kickstart that, because it's very important to us authors. Well, I hate to say goodbye, but we have another show. But thank you so much for being with us today.
Thanks so much.
Take care. Well, everyone, that concludes our show for today. As you could tell, I almost did not want to let Sebastien go. Make sure you go to his website and be watching. If he has a newsletter, make sure you sign up for it so you know when to pre-order. And if you want to enter the world of fantasy, please make sure you check out all his books. I know he got me at when he said his first book had 5 sword fights. I was like, oh my gosh, my brothers would absolutely love that. Sword fights, they get so excited about. So, and we're talking about people older than me. So fantasy is for everyone. So I hope you have a wonderful day. Don't go anywhere. We have another show coming up, and Dr. JACALYN is working her heart out producing these shows, and I just want to give a big round of applause to her. And I love everything USA Global TV does today, so make sure you stay at usaglobaltv.com. Bye for now. Hello, I'm children's author DIANN BOEHM, and I am co-host for several of the USA Global TV and radio shows. I joined because of the purpose of the USA Global TV and radio. They provide content for the viewers and listeners, an opportunity for people around the world to have their own show or even be a guest on an existing show. We truly believe in helping others get their positive message out to the world. We also have the opportunity for the listeners. You can watch on several platforms, and on YouTube, you can ask questions and even give a comment. We absolutely love it. I love being part of the USA Global TV and radio because I love positive messages, and who doesn't? And we need more of that in the world. We are a family, and we hope you will join us and become part of the family too.